our God. Eternal God, our Father, we thank you this evening for this grand occasion. We thank you for your grace and your mercy towards all of us. Thank you for this great institution. Thank you for the staff and all of those who have worked so diligently to put this program together. God, we thank you today that we come to honor and remember those that have paved the way for freedom, unity, equality, and justice for all. We ask that you bless as only you can. We thank you for the speaker of the hour. We thank you for those that are graduating and moving on into life. We give you all honor, praise, and glory because without you, we're nothing. Without you, we can do nothing. And we ask your blessings this evening upon this program. We ask it in the name that is above every name. And we say amen and amen.
Okay, please be seated. Thank you, Bishop Tillman. And thank you, Acapella, for your participation in today's opening. So first, I'd like to greet our platform guests. Dr. Blight, Mr. Morris, Chairman Cope, Provost DeQuinzio, Mr. Ravan Baksh, President Quiros, Dr. Markin, Marshall Spillage. Welcome. As an institution of higher learning founded under the patronage of George Washington, just as the new United States was launching its great American experiment, Washington College has a particular affinity for early American history. Each year at George Washington's birthday convocation, we invite noted historians, such as Dr. Blight, to share their insights about some of the most notable figures from our storied past. On this day, we also traditionally announce the finalists for the George Washington Prize, an award that honors the best written work on early American history. Established in 2005, the George Washington Prize is offered in partnership with the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History and George Washington's Mount Vernon. An independent jury of three distinguished historians and writers reviewed more than 50 books to select the seven finalists. This year's seven honorees remind us that the tumultuous and triumphant narrative of American Revolution is more than one of radical intellectuals and brave patriots. The story of our nation's birth also includes political conspiracies, evangelical awakenings, bloody massacres, and other important events. Collectively, these books put forth a compelling account of an era of political and social change in riveting detail, never losing sight of the broader significance of the founders' revolutionary ideas. Inside your program, you'll find an insert listing all seven finalists. Now, if you're looking for a rewarding way to pass a cold and gray winter, you might want to pick up one of these books and find a cozy spot to read it. But if you have something else to do, that's cool too. But you will see the literary odyssey of George Washington's world. Now, the winning author will be announced at a black tie gala on May 23rd at Mount Vernon, and will in fact visit Chestertown next fall. This annual convocation is an occasion for the college to revisit the ideals and virtues and citizenship ideals of George Washington, which he epitomized, and also to honor those who demonstrate these ideals today. Now I'd like to introduce one of the finest young people I have ever had the honor to know, one of our young leader citizens, May Quiros, who's president of the Student Government Association, to deliver greetings on behalf of the students of Washington College.
Thank you. On behalf of the student body, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the Board of Visitors and Governors, Washington College alumni, faculty, staff, students, and of course, those for whom we are gathered here today, including our new Phi Beta Kappa inductees, their families and friends, our faculty and staff service honorees, and our guest honorees. At a time when inequality and intolerance is at the forefront of American political discourse, there is no better time to discuss and celebrate the late Frederick Douglass and the monumental influence he had on the abolitionist movement 200 years ago. On this day of convocation, we gather to honor our guests who have come before us and embody the principles that we hold so dearly. At the age of 20, Frederick Douglass escaped slavery and went on to become the most well-known African-American man of the 19th century. He was a social reformer, abolitionist, orator, writer, and statesman, but above all else, an American in its truest essence, challenging this country and holding it accountable to the standard we are obligated to honor by our founders. No person, no place, no thing is perfect. The history of mankind has taught us, if nothing else, that we do not settle for the status quo, regardless of how long we have come to know it. We have before, we do now, and we always will have the audacity to be critical of these institutions and to demand change that reflects the principles that we value. I hope students in the audience, especially those graduating in the spring, will take the time to reflect on the legacy of Frederick Douglass. Our experience here at Washington College is like no other. A liberal arts education molds its students to become critical, effective, and compassionate thinkers, once capable of affecting true and fair change in the world. While we will all embark on separate journeys and be faced with unique challenges, I know that this college has prepared us to confidently and at times courageously overcome these obstacles. I'm so honored that my final duty as president of the student government falls on the same occasion of commemorating Frederick Douglass. Again, on behalf of the student body, I would like to thank everyone that is honored here today for serving as an incredible example of what we should all strive to become. Thank you.
Thank you, May. We're going to be very sorry to lose you, May, but you're terrific. Okay, so I'm going to break from the script just a minute. So we happen to have the Board of Visitors and Governors with us this weekend. So we always talk about you. So if you're here, would you just stand up so we could all take a look at you on the board? Please stand up. Thank you. It's great to have you here with us. So now I'd like you to please join me in welcoming Larry Culp, Washington College, class of 1985, who will deliver greetings from the Board of Visitors and Governors. Larry is a senior lecturer at the Harvard Business School, focusing on leadership and general management in the MBA and executive education programs. He recently joined Bain Capital Private Equity as a senior advisor. Prior to joining the faculty at the Harvard Business School, he worked for Danaher Corporation for 25 years, the last 14 as president and CEO. In addition to serving as chair of our board, Larry is also a member of the boards of T. Rowe Price Directors and Wake Forest University. Please welcome Larry Culp.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I thought Kurt was my friend, but he puts me right behind May in the agenda. How do you follow that? May, you are truly terrific. Kurt, I remember the last time we were out in public. It was a glorious day for your inauguration. Not cold and damp like today. But I think as the board is on campus for our February meeting, we couldn't be happier to have Kurt at the helm. I just want to make sure while we're gathered here today that we also give our president a big round of applause. You got some fans and cheat seats there. As chair, it is my true pleasure, on behalf of my colleagues on the Board of Visitors and Governors, to welcome everybody to this historic occasion as we honor Frederick Douglass, a courageous son of Maryland's Eastern Shore, who undoubtedly devoted his life to the abolition of slavery and to the cause of fair and respectful treatment of all people. Born enslaved on a plantation near Chestertown, just down the shore in Talbot County, the bright and inquisitive young Douglas secretly learned to read and write, embraced a moral compass that pointed to true north, and grew up to change the course of history. The Washington College community understands better than most, I think, the importance of examining our past as a way to understand contemporary society and what actions we might take together to forge a better tomorrow. The life of Frederick Douglass provides many such powerful examples. Here's just one. After publishing his autobiography and revealing his identity, and under the apprehension of being retaken into bondage, Douglass traveled to England and Ireland, where he lectured widely on slavery and women's suffrage. Upon his return to the United States, several British and Irish friends raised funds to purchase his freedom and directed considerable funds his way. Douglass used the money to buy a printing press and established the North Star paper, one of the most influential anti-slavery publications of the pre-Civil War era. He could have used that money for his own personal benefit, a balm for the pain and misery he undoubtedly endured in bondage. Instead, he used it to do important work in the service to others, to speak out against prejudice and discrimination in American society, and to champion education for all men and all women. Each of us who is a beneficiary of a gift of money, a gift of talent, the gift of a college education, would do well to remember our responsibility to use that gift to do some good work in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. When the Reverend William Smith founded our college in 1782, his naming of this institution was an acknowledgement of the values of enlightened citizenship that George Washington represented to the people of the early United States. He hoped to convey through formal education what Washington had learned through his life, and to leave this legacy to the nation, just as Washington had left his leadership as an example to all. We have a number of people who are creating their own legacies at Washington College. We have a tradition of acknowledging employees for continuous service at this institution. I am very proud to recognize those members of our community who are our long-serving employees. Provost and Dean of the College, Dr. Patrice Quinzio, will assist me with these presentations.
Thank you, Kurt. Will the honorees who are present please come forward when I call your name? Some of our honorees could not be here today, but we're as happy to call their names as everyone else. I'd like to ask the audience, please hold your applause until we have finished each category. And we'll start with staff and faculty being recognized for 5 years of service to Washington College. David J. Barr, Tiffany A. Budd, Wendy M. Clark, Jennifer C. Hutton, John K. Leupold, James M. Lipchuk, Julie Markin, and Emily Kate Smith. Stay with her. There we go. Wonderful. For 10 years of service to Washington College, Penny L. Farley, Cynthia J. Gibson, Andrea D.G. Lang, Shirley J. Lawler, Gail E. Russell, Brian Scott, Tracy D. Yanakis. Recognized for 15 years of service, Catherine L. Goldberg, Adam Goodhart, Maria R. Henson, Michelle L. Johnson, Charlie Kim, Andrew L. Oros, and Susan A. Vowles. For 20 years of service to Washington College, Austin A. Lobo and Robert J. Mooney. For 25 years of service to Washington College, Alberta L. Blake and Kevin J. McKillop. Recognized for 30 years of service to Washington College, someone who everyone on this campus knows, faculty, staff, and students. Burton R. Brown. Finally, I'd like to recognize our longest-serving employee. That honor goes to a beloved professor who has had a tremendous impact on generation after generation of students. And that is Professor Richard Gillen. He could not be with us today, but Rich is recognized today for reaching the benchmark of 44 years of service to the Washington College English Department. Thank you all.
I got it. So I just want to say to everyone who loves Dr. Gillen, I got a nice email from him today, and he's recovering well. And he's recovering so well, he's bringing his granddaughter here to enroll her. So he's the man. So I do really want to tell you how appreciative we are to the faculty. Thank you all. And the fantastic staff here for their dedicated years of service. Now, in keeping with our tradition of honoring faculty and staff for years of service, it is also my real pleasure to recognize employees as well as community members and organizations for meritorious service to Washington College, Chestertown, and the greater Kent County community. The Joseph L. Holt Distinguished Service Award. Now, he won't come up here, but I'm going to make him stand up. Stand up, Joseph L. Holt. You just saw the longest public attention Mr. Holt ever wants to have. So this is named after you for a reason, Joe. You're a phenomenal asset to the college. Thank you so much. The Joseph L. Holt Distinguished Service Award recognizes exceptional performance, leadership, and service by an employee of Washington College. The recipients of this award have a record of exemplary performance and distinctive contributions. They have improved the college's programs and our campus activities and have shown an outstanding commitment to the campus as a whole. I'm delighted to announce the 2018 award recipients. Will each recipient please join me on the stage when I call your name? Judy Berry Burrell. You have to stand next to me. I took a shower, I promise. So Judy Burrell began her work at Washington College in 1984. In her current position as Director of Alumni and Constituent Engagement, Judy has balanced the needs of Washington College alumni and administration alike with a can-do attitude that really brings results. Her commitment to open communicating with the Alumni Board, even during significant changes in the college administration, has helped the Alumni Board to do the same. Judy has been a fixture in Chestertown and Washington College communities. As an alumni and a citizen and a staffer, after the death of her first husband, Dennis Berry, she established the W. Dennis Berry Leadership Award, which continues to help students every year. Under her leadership, the Office of Alumni and Constituent Engagement tackles every alumni event with energy and enthusiasm, even in the face of competing demands for time and resources. Despite the demands of last year's Forge a Legacy campaign, 2017 Alumni Weekend beat every goal set for it. It's okay. This year, she celebrates her 25th year of work with the college, and I couldn't think of a finer time to present her with the Joseph L. Holt, Class of '83, Award for Distinguished Service. Okay. Harriet Pritchard Olson. Harriet Olson has not... You have to come here too. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Harriet Olson has not only spent the past decade developing the college's endowment and risk management practices, she's given every member of her team the skills they need to think about endowed funds and risk assessment. It says here that I'm supposed to say, she provides the president and vice president of finance with necessary financial counsel. I want to tell you what she actually does. What she actually does is tells me when to be quiet and don't say anything that I shouldn't, because I don't really know all that I should know. So she's got that courage. In her job, she ensures the intention of donor gifts, that makes sure that those gifts go to where they're realized, they were supposed to be for. Regardless of the size, scope, and complexity of the gift, she can handle it with great, great capability. And I'm allowed to say that, right?
Okay.
Okay. When it comes to risk management, we're lucky to have Harriet. Matter of fact, we just had her picture taken, and she told the photographer to get off where she was standing, because she was in charge of risk management, and she didn't like her standing up there. So this woman holds nothing back. She's also a core member of the EOG and Safety Committee, both of which she was instrumental in forming. Harriet can always be counted on for clear-eyed judgment, and she takes her expertise, consistency, and insight everywhere she goes. Despite the delicate nature of many of her tasks, Harriet has a great sense of humor and a knack for building relationships. She's known for her jokes and her ability to make tense situations more bearable. Without Harriet, we would not have the endowment and risk management practice we have today. And that is why I am so glad to present her with the Joseph L. Holt, Class of '83 Award for Distinguished Service. Ashley R. Turlington. Congratulations. That's fantastic. In her almost 7 years at Washington College, Ashley Turlington Smith has overseen day-to-day operations of the registrar's office, worked as interim registrar, and seamlessly stepped into the position of registrar, all with her door always open to students, staff, and faculty alike. There's never a time when Ashley is unavailable, even when her own life takes her off campus, even on maternity leave. I didn't realize we gave maternity leaves. Larry, we're going to have to chat about this, okay? Even on maternity leave with her own son, new son, Reed, she could be counted on to respond to emails and offer help where it was needed. Behind every success in the registrar's office is Ashley's tireless work ethic. Really? Okay. Why do people get, it's okay. Okay. Most recently, she championed the self-service student planning module from start to implementation, coding updates herself in colleague, meeting the department heads to instruct them, and even writing a detailed handbook for everyone else who might use the system. Ashley is an excellent teacher, and her kindness to others is always in evidence. Whether it's walking our international students through a confusing course registration process, saying no to requests she just can't fulfill, or showing colleagues how to use a new piece of software. She's patient, compassionate. I could not be happier to present her with the Joseph L. Holt Award for Distinguished Service. At this time, I'd like to introduce the chair of Washington College's Alumni Board, Ariane Ravenbach, from the class of 1989, to present the Alumni Service Award. Ariane.
Thank you, President Landgraf. And let me also extend my welcome and greetings to all our alumni in attendance, and especially my colleagues on the Alumni Board. The Washington College Alumni Service Award was created in 1986 to formally recognize dedicated alumni. The Alumni Service Award is given annually to an alumnus who has given outstanding and continued support to the college and/or the Alumni Association. He or she has been instrumental in encouraging prospective students to apply to Washington College, has made continued financial contributions, has been willing to give time and energy as a class agent, Alumni Alliance member, Board of Visitors and Governors member, alumni chapter officer, or contributor on special projects sponsored by the college or the Alumni Association. This year's recipient is Edward P. Norberg, class of 1982. Ed, will you please join me on stage? Elected to the Board of Visitors and Governors in 2003, Ed Nordberg was identified early on as a rising star among a new generation of alumni leadership. 3 years later, he was named board chair, handily succeeding the inimitable Jay Griswold. With the founding partner of Wakefield Capital Management at the helm of Washington College's Board of Visitors and Governors between 2006 and 2015, Washington College laid the groundwork for the current Forge a Legacy campaign, which by early this year has achieved a record-breaking $107 million. With a leadership style marked by acuity, tenacity, integrity, and a fierce loyalty to Washington College, he has a knack for cutting through the noise and getting to the essence of any given topic. At Washington College, Ed was a gifted student and a hard-driving lacrosse midfielder who served as president of his senior class. He parlayed his undergraduate degree in economics into an MBA degree from Loyola University and a law degree from the Georgetown University Law Center. Throughout his tenure on the Board of Visitors and Governors, Ed has been exceptionally generous to Washington College, supporting the Lacrosse Endowment Project, the John Toll Science Center, Roy Kirby Jr. Stadium, and the Gibson Center for the Arts. He has also created a scholarship for deserving students of economics in honor of his grandmother, Helen Sullivan Adams. A respected civic leader, Ed is the former chairman of Rebuilding Together, the nation's largest volunteer organization preserving and revitalizing low-income housing. He also serves as a board member and treasurer of the U.S. Lacrosse Foundation and as a supporter of the Tewarton Trophy, given each year by the University Club of Washington, D.C. to the most accomplished men and women's collegiate lacrosse players. With deep gratitude, the Alumni Association salutes Ed's significant professional achievements, his steadfast support of the college mission, and his unflagging service to his alma mater.
So thank you, Ed, congratulations, and thank you, Ariane, for everything that you have done as the head of our Alumni Association. You've made a real difference. Thank you very much. So the President's Medal is intended to recognize the accomplishments of an individual or an organization that has made significant contributions to the advancement of Washington College and or the region. The first recipient is an organization, the Emmanuel Episcopal Church, Chester Parish. The Reverend Dr. Darcy Williams will accept the award on behalf of the church. Reverend Dr. Williams, would you please join me on stage? Since its inception in the summer of 2012, the summer student lunch program at Emmanuel Church, Chester Parish, has provided meals to hundreds of Washington College students and National Music Festival apprentices. They give them a taste of home and community while they're away from home. Every year during the first 2 weeks of June, the program provides free lunch to Washington College students and its president, many of whom are interns or student workers who have not yet received their first paycheck for the summer. In 2016, the church's kitchen crew gave out roughly 1,000 meals. The church's volunteers and parishioners work together with Washington College and other organizations to raise the funds they need to provide a filling meal and take-home box to every hungry student who comes through their doors. Many times, parishioners actually pay out of their own pockets so that our students can take home tuna melts, chicken, casseroles, and zucchini soup. They also provide community and connection and give students a chance to get to know each other and the Chestertown community. Emmanuel Episcopal Church, Chester Parish, is to be commended for their continued care of our students, for their tenacious commitment to doing so at a great expense in both human and cash resources, and for welcoming them into their church home with grace and compassion. The proactive approach to the needs of the Washington College community has given our student workers support while they find their feet as adults. They often are living and working alone for the first time. And I'm proud to award the President's Medal to you and your organization. Thank you so much. Zucchini soup, I guess it's okay, right? That was like a joke. I'll let you know when the jokes come, okay? Okay. So I'm pleased to recognize our second recipient of the President's Medal, Sabine Harvey. Sabine, would you join me on stage? If you live in Chestertown, you've seen Sabine Harvey's handiwork, from helping local children build a community garden at the Chestertown Middle School, to her presence at the weekly farmers market in Fountain Park, to opening her home to her husband, Professor Michael Harvey's students, and accompanying his classes on summer study trips to Europe as a chaperone. She's a fixture of Chestertown and Washington College alike. Yeah, it's okay. And I told Professor Harvey that tonight he was like an add-on here, where I don't know where he's sitting. I don't know where you are, but here he is. Oh, okay. Well, you can take some of the credit for knowing her. Many of you know her as the face of the University of Maryland Extension Service at the farmers market, or her gardening programs, where she shares her extensive knowledge of horticulture with anyone who needs it. She served everywhere around Chestertown as president of the PTA, the PTSA, chair of the Garnett Elementary School Scholastic Book Fair, president of the Chestertown Moms Club, leader of the Chestertown's Girl Scout Troop, and a volunteer for the Kent County Humane Society. Whew. Perhaps most importantly, Sabine has been the heart of the Chestertown Tea Party for more than 12 years. Huzzah. Since she took the position of president of the festival in 2012, she shepherded the necessary updates to keep it fresh, breathing new life and renewed vigor back into our largest and best-known weekend festival. Without her, the Tea Party could not have survived. As Joe Holt put it in his nomination, Sabine has been one of those personalities in Kent County who has taught us life's lessons outside of the classroom. You know what? Come here. Come over here. She's modeled for us the college's mission of challenging and inspiring emerging citizen leaders to discover lives of purpose and passion. I could not have said that better, Joe. This is a true role model, and thank you for nominating her, and thank you for being here with us. Fellow Tea Party folks, you're here. It's now my privilege to introduce the president of our chapter of Phi Beta Kappa. Our chapter is Theta of Maryland, Dr. Julie Markin, who will announce the candidates invited to join this year. Dr. Markin.
Thank you, President Landgraf. Founded in 1776 by 5 students at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, the Phi Beta Kappa Society is the oldest and most prestigious academic honor society in the United States. For over 230 years, the society has embraced the principles of freedom of inquiry and liberty of thought and expression. Laptops and iPads have replaced quill pens, but these ideas, symbolized on Phi Beta Kappa's distinctive gold key, still lay the foundations of personal freedom, scientific inquiry, liberty of conscience, and creative endeavor. Only about 10% of the nation's institutions of higher learning are privileged with the right to shelter a chapter of Phi Beta Kappa. And from them, only 10% of arts and sciences graduates are elected for membership in the society. When the Phi Beta Kappa Society installed the Theta of Maryland at Washington College in 2007, it granted an institution almost as old as the society itself the ability to confer on its graduates the mark of highest academic distinction. It is now my pleasure to announce the Theta of Maryland's 12th class of candidates for membership into the Phi Beta Kappa Society. On January 31st, 2018, the Theta of Maryland voted that, in accordance with its provisions, the following individuals have met the rigorous criteria for election and have been invited to join the Phi Beta Kappa chapter sheltered at Washington College. I shall read the name of each candidate and ask you to join me on the stage for a group photo. Audience, I ask that you hold your applause until all the candidates have appeared to be recognized as a group. Maya Adorian, Rosalie Alger, Catherine Arnold, Naomi Black, Bryn Browse, Heidi Butler, Ewan Cow, Emily Castle, Nicholas Couto, Danielle Evans, Anna Gertzen, Sarah Graff, Alexandra Green, Elizabeth Cara, Evan Laking, Shannon Lawn, Rachel Martinez, Jordana Chi, Catherine Reinl, Alexandria Rydell, Brooke Schultz, Stephanie Scott, Aaron Smedley, Alexa Stella, Taylor Stofko, Shreyas Suresh, Ethan Trucker, Kirsten Webb, Jordan Weir, Gabriella Winsky, Rebecca Wood, Alexandra Young, Julia Zeng, Yankee Zoe, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present the 2018 Phi Beta Kappa candidates. You will discover that the Society is a fellowship of learners, and we hope you will have much to teach us. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen.
All good. Congratulations. So, Dr. Mark, and I thought you told me you were going to nominate me for this year. No, it didn't work? Oh, okay. I can't have everything. Well, congratulations to all those students for their exemplary character and strong academic record. I feel congratulations are in order for all the family members, many of whom are here today. And now it gives me great pleasure to turn your attention to the second half of our program. Our distinguished platform guests, David W. Blight and Ken Morris, who will help us honor the life and legacy of Frederick Douglass, a self-taught man who persevered in the face of unimaginable hardship and cruelty to become one of the most influential figures in American history. His moral principles calling for fair and respectful treatment for all people and his belief in the power of education set us free from prejudice and hate. And this continues to resonate today. To help us set the scene for the African-American struggle for freedom, Chestertown's immensely talented a cappella group, Sambarkan, will perform two songs: the Negro spiritual, Trimmed and Burning, and the folk song, Follow the Drinking Gourd, Trimmed and Burning. you'll quickly hear, trimmed and burning, you'll quickly hear, is derived from an African-American work song, Followed the Drinking Gourd, a reference to the Big Dipper star formation, which was used by the Underground Railroad operatives to encode escape instructions and map to guide fugitive slaves north to freeze them. Please welcome Lester Barrett, Jerome McKinney, and Karen Somerville. Wow, that was simply amazing. Thank you, Mr. Barrett, Mr. McKinney, and Ms. Somerville for participating in this ceremony. You were fabulous. Thank you. Dr. Blight is the class of 1954 Professor of American History at Yale University, where he has taught for the past 15 years. He's also director of the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition at Yale. Dr. Blight has earned many honors and awards for his work examining how the institution of slavery and the Civil War that set out to end has shaped our nation's history. His first major work, Frederick Douglass's Civil War, helped to establish his reputation as an outstanding authority for the period. Published to critical acclaim in 2001, his seminal Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory, garnered many of the top awards bestowed on American historians. These include the Frederick Douglass Prize, the Lincoln Prize, 3 awards from Organizations of American Historians, the Bancroft Prize. Dr. Blight, would you please join me at the lectern so I may present you with Washington College's Award of Excellence. I'm going to read his citation. History books tell us the Civil War and American struggle over slavery ended 153 years ago. Yet a glance at today's headlines is enough to show that this is not exactly true. As we continue to reckon with that unsettled past and its unsettling implications for our present and future, David W. Blight is one of our most eloquent and authoritative teachers. As professor of American history for the past 28 years, currently at Yale and previously at Amherst, and for 7 years before that, as a high school teacher in his hometown of Flint, Michigan, David Blight has educated several generations of students about the history and legacy of abolition and the Civil War. The size of his classroom expanded dramatically several years ago when his Civil War course at Yale became an online sensation, drawing hundreds of thousands of viewers via YouTube and iTunes. He has written or edited more than a dozen books, including Race and Reunion, The Civil War in American Memory, which was published in 2001. It remains one of the most influential works ever published in the field and will enlighten any reader seeking to understand the persistent legacies of slavery and white supremacy. As director of Yale's Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance and Abolition, David Blight not only fostered outstanding scholarship, but also brought the Academy into the conversation with a broader public and history into the conversation and present. His center encourages the study of slavery, not as a fact of the distant past, but as an atrocity that remains all too widespread throughout the world. Already the author of superb monograph on Frederick Douglass, David Blight has recently completed the first major biography in more than a quarter century, which will be published in a few months by Simon & Schuster. In appreciation of his ongoing achievements, which cast light into the darkness of slavery while illuminating our own times, Washington College is pleased to confer its Award of Excellence. So I'm now going to invite Dr. Blight to make some remarks. Dr. Blight.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, I wish my mother were alive to hear that introduction. She'd believe half of it, at least. This is a great honor to be here in Chestertown at Washington College, to appear with Ken, an old friend, President Landgraf, members of the board. Ken, the board are in row 6, 7.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay, right. The faculty, solidarity. Recipients of Phi Beta Kappa. I was getting worried there, guys. Take over the world and run for office. All right, since you applauded that, I'll do it. Ken dared me to do this. A year ago, it was suggested from high places that Frederick Douglass might still be alive. So the T-shirts are out. That's it, I'm done. And on the back, you can put your favorite Douglass quote. More on this in just a moment. I actually received this last summer. I teach a lot of teacher institutes, secondary teachers in the summer. And the whole seminar was on the life and writings of Douglass. And on Monday, I must have used this quote and pointed to it. By Thursday, I come into class in the morning, and they're all wearing this T-shirt. You can get anything online within 2 days, and they made me wear it all day. You can also get caps, Douglass 2020. He hasn't announced he may be an independent. He hasn't announced which party yet, but he may resurrect the Radical Abolition Party of 1858. Gosh. Would that we had a Douglass today. There are 1,000 ways to begin to think about Douglass. One of my favorites is the single verse poem by Robert Hayden. You may know it. It's simply called Frederick Douglass. In the 20th century, virtually every African-American poet did a Douglass poem. You kind of had to. Robert Hayden was a great poet, particularly in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. He wrote a lot of historical poems, but this one goes this way. When it is finally ours, this freedom, this liberty, this beautiful and terrible thing, needful to man as air, usable as earth, when it belongs at last to all, when it is truly instinct, brain matter, diastole, systole, and reflex action, when it is finally won, when it is more than the gaudy mumbo-jumbo of politicians, this man, this Douglass, this former slave, this Negro beaten to his knees, exiled, visioning a world where none is lonely, none hunted, none alien, this man, superb in love and logic, this man shall be remembered. Oh, not with statues' rhetoric, but with the lives grown out of his life, the lives, flushing his dream of the beautiful, needful thing. You can't do any better than Hayden. When President Obama gave the dedication speech, September 24, 2016, that's just a year and a half ago, at the new National Museum of African American History and Culture. You can pull that speech up online. It's a good one. It's really a good one. Obama not only loved history, he had a sense of history. He delivered what he called a clear-eyed view of a tragic and triumphant history of Black Americans in the United States. He spoke of a history that is central to the larger American story and one that is both contradictory and extraordinary. Real history. He likened the African American experience to the infinite depths, he said, of Shakespeare and Scripture. The, and I'm quoting him, embrace of truth as best we can know it is where real patriotism lies. Douglas would have applauded that. Naming some of the major pivots of the country's past, Obama wrapped his central theme here about the nature of African American history in a remarkable sentence about the epoch of the Civil War. I quote him, "We've buttoned on our Union blues to join the fight for our freedom. We've railed against injustice for decade upon decade, a lifetime of struggle and progress and enlightenment that we see etched in Frederick Douglass's mighty leonine gaze." Good speechwriter. Douglass's gaze. You know, Douglass's image now is fairly well known across the land, at least the image. He was the most photographed American of the 19th century. His image is in textbooks and school classrooms and all over Washington College, at least now. He wasn't much recognized on the Eastern Shore till 20-some years ago, as I'm sure many of you know. But how Americans react to Douglass's gaze, indeed how we gaze back at that image, and even more importantly, how we read, appropriate him, and engage his legacies, informs how we use our past. And to some degree, it determines who we are. If people used to have to get right with Abraham Lincoln, as they used to say, get right with Lincoln, what would Lincoln do? What would Lincoln say? It may be the time to ask about getting right with Douglass. What would Douglass say? What did he say? Douglass's life and writing emerged from nearly the full scope of the 19th century, representative of the best and the worst in the American spirit. Douglass constantly probed the ironies of America's contradictions over slavery and race. Few Americans use Shakespeare and the Bible. Obama's speechwriter and Obama himself knew what they were doing with that. Few Americans use Shakespeare and the Bible to comprehend his story and the story of his people as much as Douglass. He was deeply steeped in the Old Testament. And he could throw off lines from Hamlet and Macbeth and particularly Othello with anybody. And there may be no better example of an American radical patriot than the slave who became a lyrical prophet of the ideas of freedom, natural rights, and human equality. Obama channeled Douglass in some way in that dedication speech, and knowingly or not, so do many people today. One of the greatest stories in American history began about 35 or 40 miles south of here at a horseshoe bend in the Tuckahoe River or creek, depending on, in Talbot County, there's a divide. Is it a creek? Is it a river? It's all right. I go river now. Why not? Creek is just not quite good enough. Anyway, at a horseshoe bend in the Tuckahoe River, just up a little ravine through the reeds, where his grandmother Betsy Bailey's cabin was, either in that cabin or somewhere nearby, began one of the greatest stories in American history. It's an unlikely story, but it's one of our greatest stories. I want to reflect just for a moment on how complex it is, and then wrap up by explaining the quote on the back of that T-shirt. There were many Douglases after he escaped from slavery, after he gets out of Maryland, many Douglases, after he joins the abolitionist movement in the 1840s, after he becomes the great orator, as and while he becomes an editor of a newspaper for 16 years and brilliant at the short-form political editorial essay. During and after he writes 1,200 pages, 3 and then revised the 3rd into a 4th autobiography, after thousands upon thousands of speeches and lectures all over the British Isles and all over the United States, and even a few on the continent of Europe, Douglas may have been the most widely traveled American of the 19th century. No one can ever, well, one of you digital geniuses, get busy on this. There's probably a way to do it somehow. But I'm saying in the book that he may have been the most traveled American of the 19th century. So go do the research and verify it for me, will you? Mark Twain may have beat him because Mark Twain went to Asia, and that's cheating. So, but I am pretty confident that there's no American who was heard more often as a lecturer, an orator, than Douglas. Thousands of speeches, hundreds of thousands of people heard Douglas. In fact, it became an American wonder of a sort, an American thing to hear Douglas. Oh, the day I saw Douglas, the day I heard Douglas. There are all kinds of examples of that. But there were many, many Douglases. He's a very complex figure. Don't put him in one box or one package. And it's this set of kind of paradoxes that make his story so attractive to, frankly, biographers, as well as to so many constituencies today, right and left and in between. He was, on the one hand, a radical thinker and a proponent of classic 19th century political liberalism, which argued that all solutions are essentially political and within law. At different times in his life, for varying reasons, he both hated and loved his country, and you can find both of those. He was a ferocious critic of the United States and all of its hypocrisies about slavery and race, but also, after emancipation, after the Civil War, he became a government bureaucrat, a diplomat, and a voice of imperial expansion. He was. He strongly believed in self-reliance, especially for black people, and he argued it all the time, especially about the Reconstruction era. But he also demanded an activist interventionist government at all levels to free slaves, defeat the Confederacy, and protect black citizens against terror and discrimination. He did both of those. Don't put him in a box. Douglas was a serious constitutional thinker. He's taught in law schools today, particularly one speech that he gave in Edinburgh in 1860, all about the anti-slavery interpretation of the Constitution. He's a serious constitutional thinker, and few Americans have ever analyzed race with more poignancy and nuance than this mostly self-taught genius with words. He was a radical newspaper editor, writer, activist, organizer, but also he was a hard-earned political pragmatist. He had to learn politics. Politics is learned behavior. You're learning. Run for office. Douglas was Jim Crowed more times than he could possibly count in his lifetime, even down to the last couple of years of his life. But he loved the Declaration of Independence, the natural rights tradition, and especially the second reinvented United States Constitution fashioned during Reconstruction. He fought against mob violence, but he believed in certain kinds, under certain circumstances, of revolutionary violence. In his own career, he heroically tried to forge a livelihood with his voice and his pen, with words, which were the only weapon he ever had. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, though we call him all the time a self-made man, he wasn't entirely a self-made man. That image we love to process him through, and a symbol he touted himself in one of his most famous speeches. But Douglass would have been the first to admit and tell you of the dozens of people who helped shape his life, especially women. From his grandmother on, to his wife of 44 years, Anna, his daughter Rosetta, 2 European women who became advisors, helpers, professional partners, maybe something else. For the moment, let's not go there. And a host of other abolitionists and thinkers he relied upon. He learned from people. He always kept learning from people. He lived a life, eventually, where he absolutely demonstrated that he believed women were equal in every fundamental way and ought to have all human rights. But he conducted his own personal life sometimes as a patriarch. He had to, in some ways, in a difficult marriage and while overseeing a large, often dysfunctional extended family. Long story. Context and timing are often all in understanding the lives, the ideas of such important people. I'd love to go on, but I won't. I want to end with this. It's Douglass's story, in the end, that he most left us. He knew it. That's why he kept rewriting his autobiography. And by the way, if you're a biographer, never trust anybody who writes 3 autobiographies. They're trying to control everything you say. And he left a lot out, of course, as all memoirists do. He was a brilliant memoirist, but boy, was he manipulative. That's the art of autobiography. But it's his story that brings us here. There's virtually no other story quite like it. And I don't mean that in just this Horatio Alger idea. Oh, he invented himself out of slavery and became the great man, just like that. Fast train to great man. No, it's a complicated story. But he is heroic. And he's even heroic in old age. Not just that youthful Douglass who escapes from slavery and can write his story when he's only 27 years old and can get up on platforms when he's only 23 and 24 and wow audiences that just keep coming back to halls. And he's on platforms with like 4 and 5 abolitionists, and they start speaking, and then the crowd starts shouting, "Douglass, Douglass, Douglass." They wanted to hear him. He is that. But he was also learning at every step, which is important for particularly young people to know. It's his story that instructs. There's no greater voice of America's terrible transformation from slavery to freedom in the middle of the 19th century, really the pivot of American history, than Douglass. For all who wish to escape from an imprisonment of outward or inward captivity, you would do well to feel the pulses of his life and read the words of his voice. He was always a voice. And when you write his biography, you are in many ways writing the biography of a voice. He's about words. But then you should go act in the world. That's what he would have wanted. Go out and act in the world. In the final lines, the final sentence of My Bondage and My Freedom, the second autobiography of 1855, a must-read, folks. It's his long-form masterpiece. It's a much more political autobiography. It's a dagger of an autobiography thrown into the middle of the slavery crisis of the 1850s. The last line of that book says, Douglass says, that he would never forget, quote, his humble origins, Eastern Shore. He would never forget his humble origins. And he said he would never cease, quote, while heaven lends me ability to use my voice, my pen, or my vote to advocate the great work of the universal and unconditional emancipation of my race. My voice, my pen, my vote. It's still the same. The gadgets are different. Some of the tools are different. But it's still what we have. You have a voice, a pen. That's the hardest. Writing. God. And you have a vote. As we look upon Douglas's it's the last line. As we look upon Douglas's leonine gaze, going back to Obama, now we may recognize that that universal work is still the same. Your pen, your voice, and your vote. Thank you.
Wow. It's an honor to have you here. That was spectacular. Let's give him another round of applause. Wasn't that? Well, thank you, Dr. Blight. As Ken Morris told our students earlier today, his hands have touched the hands that have touched Frederick Douglass. He's just one person removed from slavery and from the force of character that overcame that state of wretchedness to achieve greatness. The founding president of the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, Mr. Morris began his day in Chestertown with a group of local middle schoolers, talking about his great-great-great-grandfather's crusade for social justice. Through its 1 Million Abolitionist Project, the foundation is giving away 1 million copies of Frederick Douglass's narrative as a way to encourage and empower this generation to become agents of change. His visit with Washington College students, members of our Black Student Union, students in history, literature, political and science, and international studies, and others concerned with racial divisions and modern human trafficking was equally inspirational. Thank you. Ken, thank you very much for taking the time to share your message and raise awareness about these important issues. Would you please join me at the lectern so that I may present you with Washington College's Award for Excellence. So in addition to everything I just told you, I had a chance to spend time with him. He's actually a really good human being.
My mom would be happy about that.
As a direct descendant of two great American heroes, Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, Kenneth B. Morris, Jr. stands on the shoulders of giants. But he's hardly just going along for the ride. Rather, he carries forward his family's extraordinary legacy in the fields of education and anti-slavery work. Ken Morris grew up in Washington, D.C. and California, among relatives with firsthand memories of Douglass and Washington. In 2007, after a successful career in business, he teamed up with his mother, Nettie Washington Douglass, to establish the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives. This organization is a modern-day abolitionist group working to combat the global human trafficking, which continues to enslave millions throughout the world, including the United States. Guided by history, its philosophy, is abolition through education, emphasizing the need to educate young people about this pervasive but too often invisible crime. Like their famous ancestor, Frederick Douglass's modern-day descendants carried their message in public speeches and media appearances across the country and beyond, as well as through books and school curriculum that serve children from grade school through high school. During this anniversary year, Ken Morris is serving as a member of the Frederick Douglass Bicentennial Commission and also ramping up the efforts of the family initiatives, launching the 1 Million Abolitionist Project, which is printing 1 million copies of Douglass's autobiography and distributing them in schools. Just this morning, he was handing out copies to Kent County Middle School students. As we honor Frederick Douglass's living legacy, we can think of no one who embodies it with more passion, more vision, and commitment than Ken Morris. He sets an example for citizen leaders of all ages and backgrounds. In recognition of his outstanding work, Washington College is pleased to confer its Award of Excellence. Thank you. So before I invite Ken to speak, I have the tremendous honor of posthumously conferring upon Ken's great-great-great-grandfather the highest degree that Washington College could bestow. Frederick Douglass's work as a social reformer spanned 50 years, ranging from abolitionist activities in the early 1840s to his attacks on Jim Crow and lynching in the 1890s. For 16 years, he edited an influential black newspaper and achieved international fame as an inspiring and persuasive speaker and writer. In thousands of speeches and editorials, he levied a powerful indictment against slavery and racism. He provided an indomitable voice of hope for his people, embraced anti-slavery politics, and preached his own brand of American ideals. I'd like to now invite Chair Culp to come forward and read the mandamus.
We're about to have another member of the Alumni Association.
We'll put him on our email.
To the President of Washington College, it having been recommended by the faculty to the visitors and governors that Frederick Douglass was an individual of unusual scholarship and learning, and therefore worthy to receive highest honors, you are hereby authorized and directed, in accordance with the ordinance to that effect, to confer at the Washington's birthday convocation on February the 23rd, 2018, causa honoris to Frederick Douglass posthumously, the degree of Doctor of Laws, signed the visitors and governors of Washington College in the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Chair Culp. So I'm going to read the citation. 200 years ago this month, a child was born to an enslaved woman on the eastern shore of Maryland. He never knew the exact date of the birth, since no one bothered to record it. He never knew the identity of his father, who was a white man, possibly his master. And he barely knew his mother, who was sent to work on a distant farm while he was still an infant. Like several million other black Americans held in legalized bondage, he lived under the shadow of a sudden, violent, and forced separation, powerless to make many of the most fundamental decisions about his own existence. His value as a human being was reckoned in dollars and cents, not just by his masters and overseers, but even by the laws of the United States. He was forbidden the most basic education because his master told him a little learning could forever unfit a child to be a slave. And yet Frederick Douglass would grow up to become one of the greatest visionaries, writers, and thinkers in our nation's history. He turned his master's words of warning into a mantra of hope. Education meant emancipation. The young slave taught himself to read and write one letter at a time, studying the chalk markings that shipbuilders scrawled on their wooden planks. Not many years later, after escaping to freedom, he penned a book that became the canonical text of American literature. For the first of his 3 autobiographies, soon he would be embraced as an equal by famous intellectuals on both sides of the Atlantic. For Douglass, however, education meant more than just a mastery of words and ideas. It was a way to inhabit the world that was the opposite of slavery. Education meant an unceasing commitment to analyze and challenge long-accepted truths, to call out hypocrisies, and to not merely dream of a better future, but also devise the means to achieve it. Tirelessly, he pursued these missions as an activist, diplomat, author, editor, and agitator. His achievements, in turn, educated and continue to educate millions of Americans of many ethnicities and ideologies. He was not only America's greatest learner, but perhaps America's greatest teacher. For the first time in our long history, Washington College is presenting an honorary degree posthumously. We do this not just because we take pride in this son of the Eastern Shore who became one of our country's preeminent citizen leaders. We do it because Douglass's work is just not finished. Not in our community, not in our nation, and not in the world. Today we commit ourselves to his model of education and to his example of moral courage. As with deep gratitude and admiration, we confer the honorary doctor degree of letters. It is my pleasure to invite Frederick Douglass's great-great-great-grandson to offer a response.
Thank you. Thank you. All I can say is wow. I have a little bit more to say than wow, but thank you, President Landgraf. This is just an incredible honor for our family, and I'm honored and privileged to represent the Douglass family in accepting this posthumous degree. Chair Culp, thank you very much. I'd also like to say hi to the faculty. And also to, this is the part that you told me about, to the board. The Board of Visitors and Governors, and then of course all of the honorees this afternoon. It's just wonderful to be here with you. You know, we're here in the eastern part of the United States, and of course I've got some family members here. Because if we know our Frederick Douglass history, he was born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey on the eastern shore of Maryland. And so I would like to recognize my Bailey cousins, Terrence Bailey and his wife, Michelle, if you could please stand up. Yes. Terrence is a direct descendant of Frederick Douglass's brother, Perry Bailey. And I've also got a new cousin that I found out about, and as Terrence told me the first time I came to the Eastern Shore, he said, "Don't worry, cuz, you've got hundreds of cousins out here. You've got a big family." And so I'd like to also recognize Professor Dale Green, who is a descendant of Bishop Wayman. And the Wayman family, is married into the Bailey family. So as I was introduced, I think I heard President Landgraf say I'm the great-great-great-grandson of the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass and the great-great-grandson of the great educator Booker T. Washington. And that's a whole lot of greats. And every time I tell people what my relationship is to my ancestor, not only is it a mouthful trying to spit out all of those greats, but it does sometimes make me feel far removed. And you may be sitting there having a hard time trying to imagine what my connection is to Douglass and Washington. It's kind of like trying to picture what $1 billion looks like with all of those zeros. But many people know or knew a grandparent, and some of you may have known a great-grandparent. And that's how close I feel to both of my ancestors, because you see, my great-grandmother, Fanny Douglass, to whom I was very close, she lived to be 103 years old. And she met Frederick Douglass when she was about 8 years old. She didn't know that she would grow up and marry his grandson, Joseph, but that's what happened. And my Aunt Portia, to whom I was also very close, was Booker T. Washington's daughter, and she lived to be 95 years old. And I remember being a little boy and sitting on my great-grandmother Fanny Douglass's lap, and she would tell me what it was like to know, as she would call him, the man with the great big white hair. And I remember sitting on my Aunt Portia's lap, and she would tell me firsthand stories about her father, Booker T. Washington. And one day when I was having a conversation with students and they were looking at me cross-eyed like, you are so far removed. What does this have to do with my life today? All this talk about history and heroes and heroines. And so I was trying to wrap my mind around the distance between the generations, and I had this thought that hands that actually touched the great Frederick Douglass and hands that touched the great Booker T. Washington also touched mine. So in a sense, even with all of those greats, I can say I stand just one person away from history, as you heard, and one person away from slavery. We're not that far removed from the history of slavery in this country, and since we started our organization in 2007, I've been able to travel all over the country and have conversations and dialogue with students in every corner of the country. A lot of times I think they think that this history happened so long ago, and it's hard for them to imagine that these were people that lived and did such great things and overcame obstacles and challenges to go on to affect the lives of many people. And as I stand here thinking about this degree that was just conferred on my ancestor, I can't help but think about his time on the Eastern Shore. And my friend David did a great job of laying out his life from his time in slavery and all the way through becoming a statesman and a diplomat. But I want to focus my remarks just on his time born into slavery not too far from here. As I mentioned, he was born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. He would later change his name to Douglass so that it would be harder for his master to track him down after he escaped from slavery. But he was born to an enslaved woman and to a white man, and it was presumed that his master was his father. He never had a pair of pants or shoes until he was about 7 years old. And he used to sleep head first in an old corn sack on cold winter nights with his feet hanging out because it was the only way he could try and keep himself warm. And he only saw his mother 4 times his whole life, and that's because she lived on a plantation that was 12 miles away. In order for her to see her son, she would have to work in the fields picking cotton from sunup to sundown, and then walk 12 miles in the middle of the night just to spend a few precious moments with him until he fell asleep. And then she would walk 12 miles back so she could be back on the plantation by the time the sun came up, because if she wasn't, as Frederick wrote in his narrative, his first autobiography, she would have likely faced a brutal beating. But he did have someone early on in his life, his grandmother, Betsy. And his grandmother's job on the plantation was to raise the children until they were old enough to really begin their life in manual labor. And on this plantation on the Eastern Shore, that was right around 5 or 6 years old. And his grandmother said to him, "We're going to go on a long journey." And that journey was a walk that extended 12 plus miles, where they were going to go, and she was going to drop him off at the White House plantation. Now, she had done this many times before with the other children, but not necessarily with her own kin, her own grandchild. And so if you can imagine this little boy making this long journey, and I imagine she's carrying him much of the way when his legs wouldn't carry himself, and they would finally make that last mile walk from the street up to the house, and he would run off a little bit to check out his surroundings, and when he turned around, his grandmother was gone. And so now he was truly alone. He was an orphan. He, as I mentioned, only saw his mother a handful of times, didn't know who his father was. He had brothers and sisters, and they were like strangers to him. And now the only person that showed him some love and nurturing early on is gone. So you have this little boy who had no family, he had no home, and he had no country. But in spite of all of that, he was able to rise up and to go on to effect change and to change the course of history for our country. We would be a very different country had there not been a Frederick Douglass. And I want to focus on one area of his early education, because this is at the foundation of the work that we do and the 1 Million Abolitionist Book Project giveaway that we're endeavoring to give away 1 million copies by the end of the bicentennial year. His actual bicentennial was February 14th, so last week I was in Washington, D.C. in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and I had an opportunity to go to, I think I counted about 15 events where people were celebrating and commemorating the life of this great hero. And so this has really been a whirlwind month for me, traveling all over the country. But this one moment in time, Douglass writes about this in his narrative. He called this divine providence in his favor. And he was chosen from among all of the children on the plantation to go to Baltimore to be the house servant for his master's brother-in-law. Now, the importance of this move, he was leaving a plantation where he wasn't in an environment where he could learn how to read and write, and he was going to go to Baltimore, and he'd be in the big city with free black children and with poor white children. But what happened most importantly when he got there was his slave mistress, Sophia Auld, had never had an enslaved person before. And she didn't know that it was illegal to teach young Fred his ABCs. And so she began to teach him how to read and write. But when his master found out about it, when Hugh Auld found out about it, he got angry, and he forbade the teaching and the lessons. And he looked at his wife, Sophia, and he looked at Frederick, and this is the message that he heard from his master, is you cannot teach a slave how to read and write, because if you do, it will unfit him to be a slave. Did you all hear that message? So Frederick looked at his master and thought to himself, if you don't want me to have this, I'm going to do everything in my power to gain it. And he understood right then and there, as the middle schoolers said to me earlier today, knowledge is power. And education equals freedom. It would be his pathway to freedom. And so he began to unfit himself to be enslaved by teaching himself to read and write. And he was very clever and very creative in the way that he went about this. He would trade bread for reading lessons. He also wrote in his narrative that he was always so hungry as a slave child, that he always had this pit of hunger in his stomach that would never go away. And on occasion, when he would get food, the overseer would take sloppy cornmeal mush and throw it into a trough similar to what pigs eat out of. And he, along with the children, would crawl as fast as they could to try to eat what little food was in there, to eat like pigs and to eat like animals, because that's what he was considered. He was property. He did not own himself. He was no better than the cattle, the sheep, and the horses. But if you think about this idea that this boy would trade bread, trade food, trade something of such great importance for lessons. And the kids this morning got it. Before I even had a chance to say, they say, Mr. Morris, that means he would rather feed his mind and have his stomach go empty. And is that a message that is as important today as it was all of those years ago? And so what we're doing with our 1 Million Abolitionists Project, we republished his narrative. It's a special bicentennial edition, and we wanted to make it accessible to students, to young people, to speak to their challenges that they face today, and to inspire them with the life and legacy and the words of Frederick Douglass. And so in the same way, when Frederick started to unfit himself to be enslaved, he started to think critically about his condition of oppression and enslavement. And he started to ask questions like, why am I a slave? And why do you own me? And then he would turn to God and he would say, God, he would pray for deliverance, pray for freedom. But then he would say, God, I don't understand how my master puts on a suit every Sunday, goes to church, and in the Word and the Bible finds justification to dehumanize, exploit, brutalize, rape, pillage, and plunder his property. Frederick couldn't see, he couldn't understand the hypocrisy in that. And one of the first books that he would read would be the Bible. And in the Bible, he found that God did, in fact, love him. And God didn't mean for him to be a slave for life. And so he's thinking critically about his condition. And as I've traveled around this country, and I've spent time in schools and youth detention facilities and barbershops, I had a young boy, a 16-year-old African-American boy in Albany about 4 years ago say to me, he wanted to describe the mental bondage that he felt in his mind. And he said, Mr. Morris, my mind feels like a dark, pitch-black hallway with no doors and no windows. And there's no way out. I don't know which way to turn. But what you just told me about Frederick Douglass and his ABCs and how he valued education, that was a little spark of light into my mental darkness. And now I can start to see my way out of it. Our young people everywhere are living in mental bondage. There are a lot of adults living in mental bondage that can benefit from this book also. But when we give away 1 million copies, I know, like I said today to the students, that there is a Frederick Douglass sitting in classrooms everywhere. There's a Sojourner Truth, there's a Harriet Tubman, there's a Susan B. Anthony, there's a Cesar Chavez. Pick your freedom fighter of choice. They're sitting in classrooms everywhere, and we just need to awaken their spirit and their consciousness. And as the young people say to me, get woke. And I can proudly tell you that I am woke, and I plan to stay woke. And so as we've had conversations and we've handed out this book, what we've seen is young people start to break free from the mental chains of their minds. And they start to look around. And in the same way that Douglass and the abolitionists looked at this legal institution of slavery and thought, how do we go about dismantling that? Imagine the challenges that we have today, but looking where your federal government said it's legal to enslave you, illegal to teach you, most people would run away from that challenge. Now, of course, we needed a civil war to officially end slavery, but what we're seeing is we're seeing young people that are looking at institutions, American institutions, where racism is systemic. And they're starting to think about, how do we organize? How do we come together? We saw this with the students down in Florida around gun laws, gun safety laws. And so now they're thinking, okay, these institutions exist, but how do we go about strategically dismantling them and bringing them down? And so we are so proud to have partnered with Washington College on this project. We gave away, I think, about 150 books this afternoon to the middle school students. The students at Washington College are coming together as mentors, and they're going to go into the classrooms of these middle schools and help them kind of process what's in this book, because Douglass spares no detail when he's describing his situation in enslavement. And being his descendant, I've had people of all ages and all races come up to me my whole life and tell me how Frederick Douglass inspired them. Or they read the narrative. They always remember how old they were, what grade they were in, or if they were in college. And many times they would come up with tears in their eyes. And when I was a little boy, it was hard to imagine or even understand the emotional connection that so many had to my ancestors. But it wasn't until several years ago where a lady came up to my mom at an event, again with tears in her eyes, and she said, Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington's examples of courage and heroism mean so much to me that I am the person that I am today. I'm the leader that I am today. And if I could thank them in person, which I can't, which apparently the person in the White House doesn't know that you can't thank them in person, but Frederick is an example of someone who has done an amazing job, I hear more and more. In fact, when we sent our manuscript to the printer on January 31st, we were sitting around thinking, a year ago, January 31st, how are we going to get publicity for this project and this book? Right. And then the next morning, I live in California, so I'm 3 hours behind, and the news cycle had already started. And by the time I turned on my phone, it was blowing up. Did you hear what the president said? I can't believe he doesn't know that Frederick Douglass is not still with us. But that's how people wanted us to respond, but what we did was, because the spirit of Frederick Douglass lives in all of us, and I've always believed that the spirit of Frederick Douglass has the ability for us to come together and unify and to love each other, we decided to respond by saying, if the president had more time to elaborate, he would have said, Frederick Douglass has done an amazing job, and then we listed 15 bullet points. Teaching himself to read and write over the objections of his overseers, escaping from slavery, and the list goes on and on and on. And we used it as a teaching moment, and we found that his supporters and detractors all came together to say, that is the spirit of Frederick Douglass that lives in all of us. And I'm hopeful. Douglass said, without struggle, there is no progress. And I'm hopeful that after this struggle that we are going through right now, that we will come out on the other side better people who are more loving and caring and understanding of our differences. And I think this is what Frederick Douglass, his spirit, can do. And so I hope that, like each individual that we're giving this book to, in fact, there was a young girl that said to me, Mr. Morris, I researched my family tree, and I found that my great-great-great-great-grandmother, 4 greats, was born into slavery. She taught herself to read and write in secret. She ran away. She became a successful businesswoman and a philanthropist. And the young student said to me, so do you know what that means? Do you know what all of this means? And before I had a chance to respond, she said, it means I have greatness flowing through my veins, just like you do. All of us have greatness flowing through our veins, and history lives in each of us. But the future depends on how we carry that forward. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Great honor to have you here, and thank you, Dr. Blake, for being here also. So we'd like to ask you to stand and join a cappella as we sing the alma mater. For those of you who don't know it by heart, it's printed on the back of your programs. Following the alma mater, please remain standing for the benediction and the academic recessional. Thank you.
Eternal God, our Father, creator of us all, we thank you tonight for this George Washington birthday celebration. Frederick Douglass Bicentennial. We thank you for recipients. We thank you for the honorees. We thank you for those that participated tonight. Oh God, as we leave this place, let us go down in love, purpose, to fulfill the dream that all of us are created equal. As we press forward, learning and educating ourselves and understanding one another, because we understand that there's nothing more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Let us leave here tonight loving one another, unifying ourselves and becoming one, that one day we might live out to see the dream that none of us be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. Continue to bless this institution. We thank you for what it has meant to this community, to this nation. And we ask that you continue to bless us as we leave this place. Allow us to get home safely wherever we might go. To this end, we thank you and we give you praise. Amen and amen. God bless you all.
Well, thank you all for being here. Please join us in the lobby for a reception and to meet the honorees. And I understand that Dr. Blight might be signing some T-shirts in the lobby. So thank you all very much. It's been a great afternoon, and please join us in the lobby. Thank you.